and so more and more education. So I hope, that's my hope for the future, is that education keeps on growing, and more education means more exchange. For example, the best answer to Donald Trump is to have all this scientific exchange, have you guys in master and PhD working in the US and have American coming here,
right?
And that's really the nicest thing we can do for research, for many things, also for the future of the world.
Right.
That the more exchange we will have, the less likely you will feel to go to war to this guy. You didn't your postdoc with this guy. Come on, you don't want to. Well, he's not the stupid American on the other side of the world. He's become the guy you share a bench with.
Yeah.
So,
I can't think of any more human activity than conducting science experiments.
The game I play is a very interesting one. It's imagination in a tight straitjacket.
The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, but the way those atoms are put together.
What I always think should be the basis of education is not answers, but questions. We should teach kids how to question.
So, I'd like to welcome you to the podcast. I've had you as a lecturer, I think, or as a tutor in my undergrad, and I think I had you for a science research project. You and Marion were organizing that, and it was really fun. So all those, especially the chemistry ones, I think you did a really good job at breaking it down and explaining it. So,
cool.
Yeah, so it's actually really nice having you, so we can talk about how you got into what you've done. So I suppose let's start with, what got you interested in science?
Well, originally I grew up in Toulouse in France, and Toulouse is a city from Airbus. So a lot of Airbus, a lot of planes.
Okay.
Like half of the plane now in the world are manufactured either in Seattle in the US or in Toulouse.
Oh wow.
And so when I was in high school, I didn't really understand the difference between material science, physics. So I wanted to build planes first, and then I wanted to do new material from planes, and I thought it was physics. So I found in high school chemistry pretty boring.
Really?
Got very good marks, but I found why would you do that? Went to university, and then at university I realized that I was interested in materials. And what really I was interested in was called chemistry, not physics. So it's all come from plane, and now we do a lot of materials for mining, for water purification, not even for planes, because in Australia there's no plane industry. But but that's come from that. The idea of, I could see in Toulouse, you can see plane taking off. My father was working for EADS, manufacturing planes, so
Right, so that's interesting. I've always been fascinated by airplanes. I mean, you get this 80-ton tube of metal carrying like 200 passengers. How does it's just magical. It can just get up and stay in the air. In fact, whenever I've gone to the airports, I usually go to the window and I just watch like a little kid. I'm like, oh, that's taking off, that's landing. That's fascinating.
Especially the very big one, all the new, not new anymore now, but the A380.
Oh yeah,
which is the largest plane. So all these materials they have to use, so that doesn't use too much fuel, but doesn't break.
Right.
It's nice.
You have to consider the weight, the strength, all that stuff. And so at that time you were thinking, I want to get into something that would help me create new materials that would advance the aviation industry. And so when you went to university, it shifted into chemistry. So you had no chemistry background in high school? Or
in France, if you do science, you have to do chemistry.
Okay.
So it's mandatory. If you want to do science at university in France, and the HSC, there's not many options in the HSC. There are like maybe 10 different options. and one of them, there is only one HSC in science where you can adjust, but you have to do, I don't remember, between like 2 hours of chemistry a week and 4. You take the option strong in chemistry, but yeah, you have to do chemistry, you have to do physics, you have to do maths, and the chemistry in high school in France at the time, and I think now, is still, mixing solution, the periodic table, this kind of thing, which I found interesting but not challenging. Basically, I could get full mark like very easily. and it seems like you I don't know. I could not picture from the periodic table what great thing you could do.
Right.
Well, physics, I found it a lot more interesting. Yeah.
In what way?
More challenging and more applied, I guess. You could understand, like, for example, what's needed to make sure a plane can fly.
Right.
Yeah.
So in university, when you had this fascination or interest in material science or material, so how did you develop that? So what did you do?
That was very quick. In my first lecture of chemistry, we look at Schrödinger equation, the structure, electronic structure of the atoms, and from the beginning, the lecturer showed the link with materials, and the more we went, the more I've seen that physics in university for me was very similar to high school, and I could not find any new challenge in it. While looking really deeper in the matter, the material I wanted to develop, in fact, I wanted to do chemistry from the beginning, but I didn't realize it, so I was missing something. So my very first lecture at university was very important, yeah.
Right.
Well, it was a very brutal lecture as well, which is something we would not do here, I don't know, but it was really a lot of math, so resolving the Schrödinger equation. So a number of students just gave up after the first lecture, so that wasn't very good. And but in my case, it was the opposite. It was like, oh wait, so if you understand what the electron do, you can basically control everything in the material. That's awesome. So yeah.
So how you did a Bachelors of Science, was it, or specific?
Yeah. So in France, you have this two system. We had the Bachelor system already, but there is a system of elite school. And so some of the oldest and best school of chemistry, you can join them 2 years after you had uni. So the first 2 years are called preparation.
Okay.
And you have a big national exam. Like for chemistry, you got 10,000 people, I think, applying, something like that, every year, and a few hundred can get through the school, and the other one usually can go to university and complete the bachelor.
Right.
Yeah. So I went and I got. So I did this 2 years, and then I went to the School of Chemistry in Paris.
And how did you get into research?
It's a good. Well, that was from the beginning, because I don't know. I wanted to. I found the plane flying fascinating, and there was this idea from the beginning that you need better materials if you want to do bigger planes. So when I grew up, they were having all this plan about doing a new supersonic plane.
Oh,
they
is this the
still
Concorde?
didn't do it. Yeah.
Oh, is this
They've been talking about doing the new Concorde for like a long time now, since basically they did the first one.
When was the first one?
In the 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why from the material they have now, they could do something a lot better, a lot more fuel effective, especially.
Yeah.
But yeah. And they were talking also about what is now the A380. The 747 from Boeing was the only large plane in the world. So they were talking about doing one even larger, even more efficient. Yeah, and so they were talking a lot about the materials, and I was able to visit some open days at EADS or other company.
Yeah.
And see how they were doing this material. And so there was really this need, very clear, especially in Toulouse, which is really an airplane city, about lighter but strong material.
So did you have like a specific project that you worked on? Is there like an honors or master's program that you went after your
Yeah,
bachelor's?
the two. So in my master afterwards, I've done the first project working for EADS, which was a bit enlightening, but not in the negative sense. I worked for EADS and I realized that chemistry for them was more trying to clean the wastewater and so on. So a lot of the development of material was not done by EADS itself at the time, but was done by a research lab. So a research lab called Onera was doing a lot of that. So they were doing a lot of kind of subcontracting. So
Sorry? Like
so I realized
subcontracting.
yeah. So I realized EADS was not doing much research on new materials.
Right.
And I did another internship for BASF, which is the largest, was and still is the largest chemical company in the world. And that I work on simulation of the process to produce polyethylene, which is the polymer of our plastic bag.
Okay.
And that was, so when I worked for EADS, I didn't find that very challenging, very interesting. I realized that they were using some material already developed by others. They were not doing much research. But when I worked for BASF, I went for BASF because I wanted just to learn more German because I was in Germany and I wanted an experience overseas. And in our school, it was mandatory to go overseas anyway as one internship.
Right.
So I went to Germany because of the experience, but then I realized that really the way BASF was developing materials was really fascinating for me, trying to understand the synthesis, understanding the properties.
So is that when your interest shifted more away from planes into just material science?
Yeah. These two internships, yeah. Realizing that in fact, in terms of material science, the plane industry was maybe not the most innovative because there is a safety thing. So, if you do a very new material that looks really great, before you put it on the plane, it has to be heavily tested. Well, you can put it on the car with a lot less risk. If you break on the car, depending on what it is, there is limited consequences. Anything that breaks on the plane can lead to disaster.
Right.
So in fact, in terms of new materials, the airplane industry has to be a lot more conservative.
Right.
Which kind of makes sense, but I did realize that. Well, the chemical industry is really the one driving it. Yeah, the innovation. So what is developed by the chemical industry is very often used. 10 years later for the car industry and 20 or 30 years later in the aerospace industry. So developing materials is really done by chemists in really chemical companies. Yeah.
Right. You said that you're looking at simulations of polyethylene. Can you elaborate on that?
So they had very big reactor. So the process since the 1940s used to do the plastic bags. They got what they call a tubular reactor. So it's a reactor which is not very big but very, very long, kilometer long, with the monomer, the ethylene going in, and they keep on putting some molecule which start the polymerization, some initiators, and that's kilometer long. And
how many kilometers long?
Oh, it depends how much they produce, but the pilot plant they had at BASF at the time was already several kilometers.
Right.
And the industry one, I think, can be several times 10 kilometers. So it's like going on itself. So it's very long, and so they had big safety issues. That's if the reaction goes wrong because of the exothermic temperature increase, the reaction gets faster, and you can lead to what's called the popcorn effect. But when you have a kilometer long, you don't want to do popcorn with plastic basically, because it's just lead to explosion.
Right.
And there is something like 15 chemical reaction involved. So the worker on the plant have temperature measure everywhere, pressure. But sometimes when something goes wrong, they really need to react very, very fast. So it's very stressful. And also sometimes you just not, for a human, possible to react quick enough. So the idea was to have a computer simulation that can simulate all these 15 reactions. And tell the worker in 1 minute it's going to explode there. So you need really to put the inhibitor, stop the reaction now. Yeah, so to still having the process controlled by a person, but really help the person, what they call rectification. So that's the human operator can make the decision, having a real informed and quick decision.
Right. So this kilometer or a few kilometer long tube, you said you put the monomers, so there's and as they go through this kilometer or so long tube, they react with other monomers, but they also have initiator chemicals that get them to join together.
Which form the big chain in the polymer,
So as it goes through this tube, at the end you get the polymers? Is that what happens?
You get the plastic,
Okay, and what you'd have the issue was that you'd have that popcorn effect somewhere in the middle, and then the whole thing would get clogged up. And then
clogged or explode,
explode.
Clogged is obviously bad, it's expensive, but you can really have, because you're under pressure and high temperature, if you start doing that, you clog it, the pressure may increase. If the pressure increases, the reaction is faster. The temperature increase because of the exotherm, the reaction is faster.
Right.
And so you vaporize everything. And so if you vaporize everything very quickly, it's called an explosion.
Yeah,
so something we don't realize, and now I don't know where it is. But 20 years ago, the production of our plastic bag was still leading to casualties. Yeah, there was still some people being gravely injured, and from time to time, not like every day at all. But the chemical industry had a few people killed, maybe a person every second year, or not very often. But some people were still dying on the chemical plant where things were going really, really wrong.
Okay, and now that's not the case because
I think now it's a lot better. Yeah, because they got the computer simulation in place. Okay. So they can really see it coming. Okay. So they still lose a bit of money from time to time.
Right.
But I think in terms of accident, they're a lot safer. Yeah. That's one reason I think why our plastic bag, if you look, when I was kid and the plastic bag had been the same for a long time, people were talking a lot about, there will be new plastic even better, even cheaper. Mm-hmm. And finally, this polyethylene is still there. One reason is because we really control the process very well. Mm-hmm. So we were able to reduce the cost and produce it safely and get it stronger as well. The plastic bag looks the same. May have noticed that they go stronger with time. Now what you could see in the supermarket years and years ago, that the people go with the plastic bag and it break. Now it's becoming very uncommon. So they look the same. Right. But if you are doing a mechanical test on it, and the old one, assuming you keep one from 20 years ago, you will see that it's even better. Not changing much, but just
slight adjustment,
optimizing. Doing good optimization.
Right. And you'd have to I was just thinking about the tube. You'd have to control the pressure, the temperature at each of those reactions, which would occur at different points of the tube.
And that's why they have a lot of inlets, a lot of points when you can inject more monomer, you can inject more initiator, which makes the reaction go, or inhibitor, who stops the reaction, or partially.
Right.
Because it's all done by free radicals.
Right.
So you can kill some radicals to slow it down. You can create more radicals if it's stopping. And so it's a question of maintaining a balance, basically.
Right. That's so cool. That's magic.
Yeah, that's why I was really fascinated, because to me, I feel like producing a plastic bag. Cool. Okay, so you mix ethylene and an initiator, and that's it. And then when you have the whole process, the thermodynamics behind it, all the kinetics, and all the chemistry behind it is really, really complex and fascinating.
Definitely. So what did you do after that? So you worked on this with BSF, sorry.
Yeah.
And you finished your internship. It was 1 year you mentioned?
Yeah. And then the last year of my master, I did a research project on looking at really fundamental research on kinetics of polymerization. So at BASF, I could see the application of trying to understand how the polymerization goes. During my last master year, I had a project when I was using laser to try to determine really kinetic coefficients, see how quickly the molecule react and form a polymer.
Right, and so that would give you more information that you could use to improve or optimize the process with the
Exactly,
tube.
yeah.
Okay, and did that work? Did you link it back to BSF, and did they get
Well, it depends. So I did that during my master on a process which is not used by industry, some process called cationic polymerization. It doesn't work with industry because it's too quick.
Okay.
So cationic polymerization of a number of vinylic monomer, you can do the polymerization in less than a second. So what the industry do in like 8 hours, you can do in less than a second, and that's really too quick, because then the problem they have on ethylene of explosion, it's like if you do it on large quantities, you don't have to wait for it. It's like boom. And so during my master, I had this problem, like leaving vial on the bench is supposed to react with a laser, and before I go with the laser, I could see boom. so yeah. So that was very, very complicated, but was really good in training. So in my master, we submitted a paper, which was rejected, and the referee had some good points. So yeah. So I didn't get a paper from my master, even if I learned a lot. And during my PhD, I went to something in between. I got a PhD scholarship from the French chemical company Arkema, and I was looking at the same thing, kinetic constant determination, but on the monomer called acrylate, which are used to do paints and coatings.
Like acrylic paint?
Yeah, acrylic paint, like you have on this wall and so on. So when they had the same kind of problem than for the plastic bag production. So then my PhD was funded by a company, and then I look at especially at the time there was a discrepancy, because the first work on this acrylic paint was basically predicting that everything should explode. And the industry was like, wait,
What?
we've been doing that for a long time, it doesn't. But they wanted to make it safer. And so my job in my PhD was to find out what was wrong. And what I found out, in fact, there was additional side reaction that people are not accounted for. So, what people had done academically was correct, but the model was wrong, the prediction were wrong because they were missing some reaction. So with that, we were able to simulate the whole process and also, make the production of paints and coatings safer.
Right. You said that it was a similar problem in that it was a similar problem in producing the paint itself.
Yeah.
Like what was?
It's not done in this long tubular reactor. It's done in a big reactor. But one thing they have to use for adhesive paint coatings, they still use, I guess, but they had to use a lot of solvent to make sure that they control the temperature nicely. They can really get things homogeneous, stir it enough, and so on. If they were removing the solvent, which in terms of environment, you would like to do it solvent-free, the concentration of the reactive molecule of the monomer was too high, and it was leading very often to this popcorn effect as well, and so on. So they knew it's not like the polyethylene, the paint and coating are more expensive, there is more money in it, so there's not so much pressure to produce very fast. So I think the process was faster, but they wanted to do it even faster, and they wanted also to try to remove the solvent because they were using this tons of solvent, which very often that's organic solvent, so it's not very good for the environment. So if you have to recycle them, it costs money. If you just get rid of them, you're going to pollute somewhere. So the idea was to understand the process, to be able to do it without having to dilute, to make everything just slower by dilution, but instead being able to control it by putting the right amount of initiators, this kind of thing.
So you said that you found that there were these side reactions happening. So how does that fit into actually optimizing the process? So when you found those side reactions, what were they doing that was,
So they were the reaction this polymerization is done by radicals, and the radicals are very reactive.
Can you just explain what radicals are?
So a radical is just a single electron in that case on the carbon. Usually electron likes to be in pairs, so they together they create a bond. The bond is two electrons together. They don't like to be alone. So a radical is electron alone.
So when they become alone, they get radicalized.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Unstable, crazy, easy to react.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's the reason why our plastic bag and so on, the reaction can be is very quick, relatively easy, but can be explosive as well. Is because we're playing with radicals. So they're great, they're very reactive, but you don't want them to go faster than needed. So in that case, the radical can be very reactive if it's called a secondary radical, if there's not too much stuff on the carbon around it. If you put more substituent on it, if it's a bit more crowded, then it slows it down. And that's why we found there was a side reaction. This radical being very reactive, they could create a more stable radical. And the radical was still there, but like order of magnitude less reactive. So it was slowing down everything. Right. So what theoretically should have explode immediately, the side reaction was slowing it down.
Oh, it's like the family is keeping the radicalized person from exploding.
Yeah.
So hey, relax, dude, we got you back.
I guess if you leave if you leave someone alone and
those
lost and so on, it radicalized. If you got a nice environment and so on, so
keep you stable for a little while.
Yeah. I think the parallel holds. Yeah. A nice one.
Yeah, so you essentially your work led to the discovery of these side reactions that utilize radicals. And so what happened as a consequence of your research? Did they recognize the side reactions and then make adjustments? What type of adjustments did they make to ensure quality and optimization?
Yeah, well, after that, they were able to really simulate the same thing that was done for the plastic bag was done after that by the companies mostly. They were able to simulate the process and make it safer. That's one thing. And also that went beyond, because there's a second side of it that I didn't realize at the beginning of my PhD, is that this side reaction change also the structure of the polymer. That a polymer usually it's a big molecule which is very long, and that's what you would expect. In fact, this side reaction was creating this radical in the middle of this very long chain, and so it was creating what's called branches. And so instead of having a big molecule that can move freely and is limited by its size because it's big, suddenly you have a branch molecule that's not just big but also limited in its movement because of the branches, because everything is next to each other. So it's going to change, for example, the adhesion, which is very important, the mechanical property as well. So we realized that there was an impact. So there's still a lot of work on this, because the way people synthesized doing them in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they didn't know there was these branches, and so they give great properties, but not always very well understood. As from the moment we knew there was these branches, suddenly we could say, okay, so that's why when we put this component, it becomes more sticky. That's because this gives more branches. This monomer gives more branches than this one. So suddenly we had access not just to a safer process, but also to a better understanding of the properties.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think in first year chemistry they taught us branching chains or polymers. They don't stick to each other. It's not as compact, and so the intermolecular forces aren't as strong. So that would reduce adhesion.
It depends. That's obviously more complicated. It depends on which substrate. So the branching make it more bulky. So like for the boiling point, it's reduce the interaction. But if you want to, for example, have a plastic sticking to a plastic, the branching is likely, it's more complicated than that, but it's likely to reduce the adhesion. If you want to put on something like metal, it's different. Then in fact the branching in some cases may help, because the polymer chain like to stick to each other. If they're branched, they don't like to stick to each other so much. So they may stick more to the metal, to some metal. So it gives you a lot of latitude to play with, but it's not black and white. For the boiling point on small molecule, it's a perfect first year one, because it shows you that branching changes the properties, and it goes one way. The more it's branched, you see the boiling point going not linearly but continuously at least. So that's good, and because you have less intermolecular forces, so you just change the boiling point. But in adhesion, it's a bit different.
More complicated.
It
depends on what sort of things you want to stick it to, like
exactly,
you say, metal or plastics. So tell me, what did you do? I mean, coming towards the end of your PhD and finishing it, obviously you did your PhD. How many years ago was it, Patrice? Sorry, to put you on the spot.
I knew there was going to be kind of question. 2003 I finished.
Oh, that's recent. That's
it was this millennium, so it's not bad.
Oh my god, this one, this century. It's just like 14 years ago. Now finishing that, I mean, PhD is a little different now, but for you, did you decide to do a postdoc? Did you get into academia? What did you do?
I wanted during my PhD to work for industry. I didn't feel like I wanted to learn something to become a teacher at the time, and I really realized what academia was and the difference between teaching in high school or bachelor only and working as a postgraduate student and teaching postgraduate students. So I wanted to do a postdoc in any case to especially to perfect my English, and so I went for a first postdoc in Germany, because my partner was finishing a PhD in Germany, and I liked Germany. So, and then we went together for a postdoc in Australia. And slowly, then I realized that I got some jobs offer from industry, but I realized that I enjoy also. Well, I didn't hate writing grants, for example, as much as a lot of postdocs around. So, and I still love writing publication, and I still love working with PhD students. So I decided slowly to get to academia rather than industry.
Okay, so in your internship, working on the plastic and then working on the paint, so there was a common thread in that you're working with these long tubes and sort of similar issues. Was it different for your postdoc? Were you working on something that was related?
For my postdoc I was something not related in that aspect. So having worked on a lot of method to characterize this branching in the polymer, wanted to apply in something different, and realized one completely different application of this problem of branching was on food. So we started looking at starch, which is the main component of rice, of wheat, so basically bread, and there was some research already on the fact that the branching in starch changed another chemical reaction completely different from the whole adhesion mechanical property. It changed digestion. So the way we digest rice or potato or pasta is also influenced by the presence of this branching. And so during my postdoc, one of the interests was to say, okay, we developed this method for really synthetic polymer, for plastics, like bags or paints and coating. Can we apply this method to something which is quite different, but chemically not so different, which is starch, which is food?
So you said you're characterizing these polymers. What?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. What techniques were you using to characterize? And is it similar techniques? Obviously, I think you just hinted now that there's similar techniques from those industries that you're applying to.
Yep.
So what techniques?
So we were using two main techniques at the time. We were using some method to separate the different molecules. So we're using chromatography to really try to separate them. And we were using NMR spectroscopy to try to really understand how many branching points there are and which role the branching point play on the movement on the chains and on the properties.
Okay. And this had never been applied in the food industry before?
No, it has. Well, yeah, both had been applied, but they're very different way to apply it. So the NMR had been applied, but mostly by a few people. It was not very common. It's still not very common because it requires some background in physics, chemistry, and so on. So we've been looking into that. The chromatography was very widely applied, but more as a quality control. And so one of the first things, discussing with some starch people, we realized we didn't have the same definition of a solution. So when so for us as a chemist, the solution is you have your polymer chain and there is solvent all around, and you separate it. The different starch molecules don't interact with each other, otherwise it's not a solution anymore. And so the first time we started working in starch, we realized that people had this kind of milky suspension, and they call that a solution because they say, no, that's a solution. I put the starch in a solvent, so it's a solution. I say no, it's not a solution. It's just a preparation of a solution. But in that case, sadly enough, the preparation kind of failed. If you do chromatography or that, you separate aggregates. You characterize potentially aggregates. You do a lot of damage usually to your equipment. You kill your column, but yeah. But scientifically, you characterize aggregates. So if you want to characterize molecules, you have to dissolve it first.
Okay.
So this small project trying to apply it, we go back to some more fundamentals, find some condition when we could really dissolve the starch better, and slowly, we progress this way.
So what was the outcome of your first postdoc that you went through? Because I know, I guess my supervisors mentioned this is like when you go to a postdoc, make sure you bring skills that they need, but also gain skills that you're going to need in the future. Is that something that you were thinking of as you went into your postdoc?
Yes and no. So my first postdoc, it was in the Max Planck Institute for Polymer. So I went there. They had a lot of money, and my partner was finishing a PhD there. So I went there more in the idea to learn something, maybe too much with the idea to learn. So I work on like 15 different projects. I interact with, I guess, 10 different PhD students. So I learn a lot about, supervision of students. And I've been reading a lot of PhD theses, like proofreading,
right.
A lot of PhD theses. I got a great collaboration with a colleague now in Turkey that was incorporating some particles to cut UV from glass, from synthetic glass. But that was more a side project for me. That worked very well. So my first postdoc was more about learning many things and start playing more with branching and so on. But it was not very productive in terms of publication. Maybe I should have focused more. And so my second postdoc, when I arrived in Australia, that was a bit the opposite. Then I realized that, if I want to get a job, I really need to get the publications out. and so suddenly I start to be more focused, and it was a lot easier to work when you just finish your PhD and you're a postdoc. If one day, you submitting your thesis and the day after people say, can you correct this thesis and be a supervisor? It feels a bit weird.
Yeah.
You feel like, oh, well, yeah. So I think you should do that. But 2 days ago, I was not so sure about it. Now, apparently, I'm an expert.
Right.
So you don't become a supervisor like that.
Yeah.
So my first postdoc was very useful, but maybe not focused enough. And but it was great to learn many things, and the Max Planck Institute offers so many opportunities. I'm still happy I took all the opportunities, but yeah, at some point I guess you need to refocus. So that's where I started working really on the starch and so on, and we start producing a lot of paper that really attracted attention, attracted citations, this kind of thing.
So in your second postdoc, you carried on what you did in your first postdoc? Or
Yeah, but
similar
really
thing?
focus on just starch and finishing work on still working on this polyacrylate for coatings and so on, but really focusing just on that and not looking at small projects around, looking at different type of plastic, or not so much.
Right. Okay, sorry. Yep. You said, how many postdocs did you do?
Technically 2. Depend what you call a postdoc, because I'm still after my PhD, so I'm still a postdoc. But yeah, well, if you think postdoc as something which is not an academic position, I did a bit more than a year postdoc in the Max Planck Institute for Polymer in Germany. Then 1 year here, come in Australia just for 1 year. But then there was an academic position, so what's called level B research fellow position available. I applied for it and I got it. And it was a 3-year position.
Where?
In University of Sydney.
Okay.
At the time. Yeah. So I got this 3-year position in University of Sydney in the Key Center for Polymer Colloids. And then after a bit more than a year of this position, our research center moved to Brisbane, in fact. So I did most of it. I did 2/3 of it in Brisbane, not in Sydney, but yeah, which was again a great experience anyway.
Right. And so ever since that first exposure to starch, have you just been focused on that ever since France, or have you?
We keep working on it with some very good results. Then we realized that this chromatography method we want to use to understand native starch, what the plant is doing, was pretty much useless, because we were breaking the starch inside during the experimentation inside our column, whatever we were doing. So we slowed down on it when we realized that there was some limitation that we just could not overcome. And we did come back to it slowly, and now we come back to it strongly with the PhD work from Matthew and James here, who are using now electric field separation, so KPX to separate the starch. So we slow down on it. We got a number of negative results that some people in the field got really interested, but still negative results. When people tell you, "Oh, now we understand why it doesn't work," that's great. Like, yeah, well, yeah, it's kind of great. Thank you.
But it didn't work.
Yeah, so it's good. No one needs to waste his time doing that anymore.
Right.
But still didn't answer my question. So we had some up and down on this part. On the NMR part, we still be working on it because we got something more in depth and more in depth analysis. So we were able to do more and more. Yeah.
So coming to more recent times, I suppose. I suppose before that, how did you get a job at Western Sydney? So you said you worked 3 years at Sydney University?
Yeah, 2 years at Sydney. So 1 year really postdoc, 1 year academic. 2 years at Brisbane as a continuation of my academic position from Sydney, kind of. Then we decided with my partner to come back to Europe because we were looking for a more permanent job, and in Germany there was plenty of funds, so we got some 5 years position there to give us time to find a job, and my partner, she applied for a research lecturer position here, and she got it, and so we contacted here, and I was able to get a job as well. So that's how we moved together and slowly settled down to what was at the time UWS. Yeah, that was in 2010.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, her getting a job here How did you get your foot in? Like, how did you make the play? Like, hey.
Well, that was part of the discussion. That's obviously I was not going to stay in working in Germany, even if I still have 4 years of contracts while she was in Australia.
Right.
So we started looking around, and she asked, well, my partner is looking for a job in Sydney, and then they were looking for one more chemist at Parramatta, in fact. So no, it was a good match.
Yeah.
So I was able to. So it's a kind of serendipity that's
Everything worked out like that.
Yeah, finding a job very often is having the right contact.
Yeah.
So obviously, when your partner get a job in one university, that's a perfect contact. So yeah.
Yeah. Once you get your foot in, into the door, that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for us, it was very, very nice. That's from the beginning. That's something we feel like at the time. We had this motto everywhere: university for the people. That we applied together with my partner to a number of universities, and some universities, especially some French university, were saying, "Oh yeah, we give you this job," and my partner say, "Oh well, your partner do what she wants." They were like, "It's not our problem." And while here from the beginning, they were feeling like, even if I had done something that they were not interested in, they were at least happy to try to advise and help. So they were really trying to make it work so that my partner doesn't come, as it happens sometimes, come for a year and then cannot stand a long distance relation, and then
just leave.
She'd just leave, yeah. So that's something that university had really taking into account, and really taking care of the people, a lot more than some other universities do it,
right?
But a number of universities just, look at the CV. You got so many paper in this field. We take you.
Yeah.
And so I feel that was a nice thing as well for us.
Yeah.
To feel a bit welcome. Basically, feel not just you got this discovery grant.
Yep.
You got these papers. We want you, but feel like okay, we want to build something, not just get some money in the next years, but build something on the long term.
That's really cool. Let's talk about your research, what you're doing now. We've kind of touched on it a little bit, but let's talk about like the research projects that you're working on. We'll start with that, I suppose. So I know I'm familiar with a couple of your students, Kevin, Matt, and Mardine, on what they do. But what is the overall aim of your research group? What do you want to investigate? Yeah,
the research aim, which is the same since really my second postdoc, is we want to look at polymers, understanding polymers. So we look at fields, application, where there is a bottleneck. There's something that the research doesn't progress so much because people cannot really characterize the polymer, cannot understand the system well. And then we try to see what we could do. So we had done a lot of chromatography, we still do a bit. We still do a lot of NMR spectroscopy and other spectroscopy, especially in collaboration with Rick in the Advanced Material Characterization Facility. And this electrophoresis, KP electrophoresis I mentioned. And so we look at fields where there is a need for a new type of characterization, and when we could apply our skill and our methods. So we're doing a lot of food. As I mentioned, we still go on with the starch. So Matthew is really trying to look at this branching and how we can predict digestibility. So all these concepts of GI, we want the food to be slightly digested, so low GI. That's very nice, but the food industry cannot just produce it like that. So how can you predict it from the food structure? That's what Matt is working on, while James is looking at the measurement of this GI. Measurement of GI is, as you see on the supermarket, on the package, is done by basically taking blood and measuring the glucose in the blood while giving them a certain amount of food.
Right.
So you have to put people in hospital beds. Right. So you see it's very heavy. And as everything done with humans, you really would like to measure on thousands of people to really get the proper statistics. You can imagine putting thousands of people in hospital bed, You cannot afford it. No. So when they measure this GI, typically they do it on 10 people. But so you have a big problem of variability that's for a scientist is frustrating. There is a cost that is you cannot do really differently, but it's still frustrating. So with James, we're looking at some in vitro method, doing it as a test tube and getting a GI or some equivalent to GI that would be really reliable.
Okay.
So that's one thing we continue really from what we was started during my second postdoc, and really come from some methods we use now. We really develop in our PhD. We have also what I did in my PhD on the paints and coatings. There is a component from it which is soluble in water, which stabilizes the paint particles. So we did some work with colleague working for the company Deluxe doing the paint, and now Alison just finished her PhD. She's been looking at using the same polymer called polyacrylic acid and using the branching to not to do paints or to do nappies, which is a super absorbent use for, but to instead of absorb the water, absorb an anti-cancer drug and release it. So to do cancer treatment.
Oh, like targeted delivery of chemotherapies or certain drugs or...
Exactly, yeah. Really having something that can, especially with the branching, that can release the drug slowly, not like a burst, but slowly, and only or mostly in the cancerous tumor, not in the rest of the body with all the nasty side effects, yeah. So this is building also this part of the project, that's building on what I've done on my PhD with, again, a completely different application.
And I'm not sure if you can talk about Kevin's, but he's working on filters, isn't he?
Yep.
So he's...
Yeah, so this is more one of the side projects I done during my postdoc. I work again with some people in a different company, including BASF. And this one, I cannot talk too much about it, but some of the polymer we characterize there's some interest as well for the company Evoca, who is in Windsor, is doing membrane for ultrafiltration. So that's really water purification. That's a growing business, and it's great because it's really interesting. I found it really interesting because it's something which is produced in Windsor and they sell membrane all over the world. And so there is a bit this idea that manufacturing in Australia is impossible because Australian workers are paid too much, which I disagree for a lot of things. To me, the Australian manufacturing needs to be innovative and need to go to high-tech products. And that's exactly what this company Evoca is doing. They're not producing cheap membranes or the filter we use in the lab to do solution clarification. Right. They're producing industrial membrane to purify a large amount of water, like on desalination plant, for example, when you take seawater. They go to the most challenging and they do the best membrane, and so people throughout the world buy them. And they're done in Windsor. They're not.
Wow.
They don't, and they're done very happily in Windsor. I think they got a lot of knowledge there. That's as far as I know. There's no plan for this company to relocate in a cheaper labor.
Right.
Country, yeah. So it's very, very interesting because filtration, it's a mixture of polymers. We can use especially the method we developed for NMR spectroscopy. We can really apply them, do two-dimensional method, really advanced method we need. So it's really interesting, and it's also supporting a Western Sydney company who is really doing innovative work. Yeah.
Right. I guess when I finish my PhD, right now I'm focused on one thing I finished my master's now, but for the PhD, I'm still working. I'll be working on a similar question. And it looks from your story or from your journey. I've considered like how I want to get to a stage where I'm a PI. I'm a principal investigator. I'm doing research in things that I'm interested in. But from you, it seems like the question that you're pursuing now has come from your postdocs and your experience in your PhD and the internships, and that ultimately has formed the question. Would that be...
Well, you research, usually when you research, you have many ideas, and one thing I found interesting is never give up on ideas. So during my PhD, there was other people working on this polymer, polyacrylic acid, and I had a lecture in my master about this capillary electrophoresis, and I asked a number of people saying, that would be nice to try capillary electrophoresis on that, and everyone was like, yeah, that's a method for analytical chemists, we're doing polymer chemistry, that seems too complicated. My master supervisor is going to visit, in fact, from France in a month, but my master supervisor was like, you should do that, that's really new, you should do it. But every time I ask around, people say, no, it's too difficult. And so I keep, during my first postdoc, I talk about it, and I managed to buy a capillary electrophoresis instrument, do some positive tests. When I arrived in Australia, I did some work on product from Deluxe, it built up, and then it ended up on Alison in a PhD, really doing a lot of characterization and really showing this method is great and give us information that we cannot get by any other method. But basically, between the time I wanted to try in 2001, 2002, and the first good paper we did about it was 2013.
Wow.
So there is a question of persistence. If people don't really show you, demonstrate to you it's impossible, and just tell you no, that's too difficult, then you should really think about it. Maybe it's really too difficult, but maybe there's a way as well. So if you keep on thinking about it, keep on building it slowly, put different pieces of the puzzle, suddenly you may have enough pieces to build the whole puzzle. So there is a bit of that, the connection between different projects, I think, to me are important. That's starting something completely new is interesting, but it may not be the most efficient, and especially in your career you may get a bit lost. While everything I try to have it interconnected.
Okay, that makes sense. That's what I need to do. Okay.
You need to cut some dead wood sometime as well. You cannot do everything. So sometimes you just need to say, no, that I'm not going to do that, because the list of things I would like to do are like very long. There are like 20 publications I need to write, but there's like thousands I would like to. So you still need to focus.
Yeah.
But you can keep a number of them in the back of your mind, even if everyone, that's the one I found, having a few that everyone tell you, nah, but they don't tell you why.
Yeah.
If they cannot tell you exactly why it should not work, and if everyone tell you no, that could be the really one which really are going to have a big impact.
No, that's true. I mean, if everyone's stuck in one paradigm, thinking about an issue in a certain way, and it's usually people who are like outside of the field that make the biggest mind-blowing discoveries, right? Because they're not stuck in the same paradigm as everyone else. They're not wearing the same shades, so they can step back and like, oh, what if I put this here and then connect them to, oh, look, it's amazing. So yeah, that's cool. Okay, we're kind of reaching towards the end of this conversation. I guess what I'd want to ask you is, what would be some advice you could provide for students, science students who want to get into research and follow this path?
Yeah, so one of the advice is, which is a very common advice, is a patient now. Try to choose a topic because you will enjoy it. So I think research is not the easiest thing you can do, whatever, just in a postgrad degree or to find a job later on, but it's one of the most rewarding usually when you start. Even people doing research in nothing to do with chemistry, and when I start discussing with colleagues, that's a very or PhD student, that's a constant. If you start talking to them about the research, they cannot stop. So that's rather a good thing. That's what you want. You need that. So but keep in mind the long term. If you do research, you want to be important for the society, for yourself. So keep in mind the impact. If you really don't know where the research could lead you in 3 years, 5 years, then that's maybe not a good topic either. So not saying in my case, I did everything I did at the beginning because I wanted a job in the industry, and here I am as an academic. So, but I'm still happy that I tried to project myself, because then I could really build on something and have a big direction. So I think that's important. Always ask yourself, okay, if I do this project, I work on this type of food, there are plenty of jobs in the food industry. And okay, you may not know what you're going to do in the food industry, but there's plenty of jobs. And so if you find a subject you're really passionate about to do with food and know that job, I think you're on the right way. Not being more precise than that. Well, if you find this field where you really love it, but you feel like really no idea what I will do after I finish my PhD, that's maybe you want to think about it twice, because you should solve this problem first. Really find where you could go. Right.
That's some good advice. Last two questions, and I won't take any more of your time. The first question, I suppose, is, and I ask this of almost all of my guests, looking into the future, and this can be in whatever context, what are you fearful of? What are you afraid of?
Donald Trump. Do everyone answer that? Or?
Yeah, tell me, please.
Yeah, I guess the Third World War. Sorry, but
You're European, actually. You would understand that the impact of a world war and of conflict much more than someone like myself. Actually, not because I came from a country of war, but someone who's been brought up on this side of the world with no sort of exposure to that, and it's so many generations later, so we wouldn't even appreciate it.
Yeah, you know what? Albert Einstein says something like, I don't know which weapon will be used for the Third World War, but I know the Fourth World War will be done with stones and sticks.
Sticks and stones.
Yeah, sticks and stones. So that's exactly that. Yeah, that's definitely what I'm the most. Not only Donald Trump or like the Brexit is not good news. The extreme right party doing big score in France or in Austria just this weekend, and so that's I think what worries me the most. Yeah,
that worries me too, especially with the alt-right and people who are just blatantly racist and intolerant, and that's scary. Okay, flip side of that question, what are you hopeful about when you look into the future?
Oh yeah, there are a number of things to be. Yeah, it's not a single thing. It's not as easy to answer, I guess. Well, I'm always hopeful. If you look at the history of humanity, you know, sometimes people feel like it's getting worse and worse. But you look like Roman time in Europe were very peaceful. Then Middle Age was terrible. Then Renaissance was great. So it's always up and down. So I hope we rather in the down at the moment, and we can go up. So when I see, for example, in education, I think one of the strengths of a brighter future is education, and I can see that when I was a student, it was I don't think so easy to study, and so we still have to fight to explain why you need education. There's still a number of people who say, going to university brings nothing. And we still have to make sure our degree brings something, bring jobs and so on in practice. But having an education brings more than that. So I'm hopeful that slowly throughout the world, and it's go a bit up and down, but we're rather on the way up. Education is developing slowly, and in many countries, I think we're fighting for it in Australia, but it's still developing. So the new this generation of students you see here, I'm happy to see that the number of students on average in Sydney keep increasing, and the students to me seems to be as motivated as they were, especially when I was a student in my school. It was really an elite school, so you had to be the best of the best,
right?
And but there was plenty of people that told you this. I took this national exam, and 90% of the people were just like out. So what I feel is that we're getting more and more inclusive. So we're trying to we need to do a better job in maybe bringing to everyone up to the skills they need. So not everyone can be good at everything. I don't believe that, but I think we better and better are trying to help the people to do what they really want to do. And so more and more education. So I hope, that's my hope for the future, is that education keeps on growing, and more education means more exchange. For example, the best answer to Donald Trump is to have all this scientific exchange, have you guys in master and PhD working in the US and have American coming here,
right?
And that's really the nicest thing we can do for research, for many things, also for the future of the world,
right?
That the more exchange we will have, the less likely you will feel to go to war to this guy. You did your postdoc with this guy. Come on, you don't want to. Well, he's not the stupid American on the other side of the world. He's become the guy you share a bench with.
No, I totally agree with you. I think education is so important. If you have an informed population, hopefully they won't do dumb shit. So that's the hope.
With
that, I want to thank you for your time, Patrice. I really enjoyed that conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much.
Great.